news, transfer news, match previews, legend interviews, Spurs winning, press conferences, covering everything Tottenham and England.
Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the Spurs Chat podcast. In this edition, we'll be talking all about your questions and all about your comments. This is another edition of the viewers and listeners' questions and comments. I absolutely love these shows. Thanks to you, we have thousands of them. And there is a lot to talk about. So if you'd like to get involved, please do put a comment in the comment section now, or a question. And at the moment, we're live on YouTube, on X, and on Facebook. So please do get involved. Joining me today is a very special guest and channel regular, Gareth McGuinness, of course, UEFA licensed football coach. Gareth, how are you?
All good, Chris. All good, Chris. Really, really good weekend. Obviously seeing Spurs won. We were speaking off air. You're going to Belfast on Tuesday, but I was up in Belfast today with my team playing football up at Crusaders, up in Seaview. So really, really good weekend. Delighted that Spurs won, and delighted to be on here tonight to talk to the viewers, because, Chris, speaking to the viewers, it's great to hear different opinions. You know, me, you, Craig, Melvin, so many Spurs Chat podcasters getting their opinions, but it's great to hear the listeners, because they probably have different opinions to us.
Absolutely. The viewers and the listeners are extremely important to us. And let me start by saying that we are now at 124,000 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you so much for all of your support, and thank you for tuning in. We've had millions of views this month, which is absolutely incredible. So thank you. Gareth, let's start. I'm going to ask you a question from the off. How are you feeling as a Spurs fan right now? Because, of course, we're now 2 games in. A 1-1 draw at Leicester, a 4-0 win at at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium against Everton. 5 days left of the summer transfer window. How are you feeling as a Spurs fan right now?
Chris, you know me, I really struggled under the Jose, the Conte era. Under Ange, it's been a completely different feeling for me as a Spurs fan. I've really enjoyed watching the team play. Even when we get beat, I can see what we're trying to do. Now, I think sometimes I can see why fans are looking at it and going, it is a bit crazy. It's a bit, too over the top at times, trying to outplay teams, maybe even at times that are better than us. You think about Anfield last year, you think of even though we got a draw at Man City, the team we went there and played, and Man City could have been out of sight in the first half. You think about going to Fulham, Brighton, away from home at times, it is a bit dangerous. But I think Ange is going down the road that Pep Guardiola went at Man City. Now, I know we're a long way off Man City, but you remember Pep's first season at Man City, lost 4-0 away at Everton. You think about Klopp's first season at Liverpool, losing 3-0 away at Watford. You have to. It's about finding the balance. You have to maybe lose to learn. I think Ange has said that before. You lose, you learn more when you lose, and I think that's the route he's going down. He's not going to change his style for any team. He wants to either beat a team by his style of play, or else learn, and hopefully the club back him. And I know you're probably going to say that Man City and Liverpool brought on renowned players at that time, and that's probably the difference between the two at the moment. Obviously, Pep and Klopp had proved themselves at Dortmund, and Pep obviously at Barcelona. We're talking on a different spectrum, but I think we're going down this route of young players that might be great in 2 or 3 years' time. So it suggests that Ange is here for the long haul, and Chris, I have suggested patience with this process. And I think, the football is great to watch. It is. I don't think anyone, I have a lot of friends, Man United fans, Liverpool fans, even some Arsenal fans are saying you can't argue that Spurs are not entertaining. But sometimes it does need a tailored on. I think we're in a better space this year in terms of the personnel, but the quality is probably the biggest issue with the group. Yes, we've brought in young players, but are these young players ready? They challenge for the top 4. They challenge they won the League Cup. They challenge, they won the FA Cup. They challenge, they won the Europa League. I still think we're a season away, unfortunately.
Let's start the questions here, Gareth. Jim asks here, are there any new transfer rumours we should know about? Not at the moment, if I'm honest, Jim. I normally put out multiple 60-second news updates, every day. And as you probably noticed, these last few days, there have been very few and very few bits of information about transfer targets. Gareth, there's a comment here from Adam. Up the Spurs, offer Christian Romero a new contract now. He was voted man of the match for his performance against Everton by the Spurs fans on the poll in the official app. Romero, for you, it's extremely important, isn't it, that we keep players like this at the club?
Romero, look, for me, Romero is, I know he has moments of madness in him. I know he made that mistake against Leicester where he was caught ball watching. But Chris, we've been down this road. Me and you've been speaking since COVID. I've been on many a podcasts. Romero is more reliable than unreliable. He never lets us down more times than he saves us. And players like Son, Harry Kane, when they have bad games, used to come under criticism. And it's a wee bit similar with Romero. I think he's such a key player. He's got that leadership quality, and people still forget that he's still a young enough player. He just seems so much older because of how he plays. But I still think Romero is somebody that's learning the game. We're hearing rumours that Real Madrid are there, they're interested. It's not been formally sort of put up on a bud, but there's no smoke without fire. Christian Romero will be taken by a lot of teams. Apparently did them when he started even dealing with Daniel Levy, because we know what Daniel Levy's like. Because Daniel Levy says it's either 150 million or don't come near us. But I don't see any reason why we wouldn't extend his contract, because for me, he is part of the future group. And having him on an extra contract is better value for Spurs. You have to pay even more money for Spurs to even think about it. And look, I know a lot of people will say it shouldn't be about money. It should stay regardless. Unfortunately, it's a business game. And, if Romero was signed on a new contract and Real Madrid came on next year with a world record bid, Romero would leave because it is a business. But for me, he has to be tied down, secure him. He's a big part of our future. And yes, he has moments of madness. Yes, he switches off. But Chris, a lot of defenders, their peak years come when they're older. And I think Romero is definitely a player that Spurs would want to keep. And I can see him being here for a long time.
And of course, Mickey van der Ven was superb against Everton also. Owen Kelly writes here, as a Liverpool fan, always glad to see Everton getting beat, but also enjoy your work, Chris. Thank you so much,
Chris,
Owen.
Chris, Owen is a regular on my podcast, so great to see Owen tuning in. Owen is a big Liverpool fan, but you know what? A very fair Liverpool fan. He watches your shows as well, and he says he loves hearing from honest fans. So a big compliment to yourself.
Thank you. Gareth, Neil writes here, I'm still annoyed that we threw away 2 points last Monday. That could well come back to bite us at the end of the season. There have been a lot of negative fans, a lot of negativity since Monday. I think it was, and I said this on the podcast after the Everton game, it felt weird recording that podcast, because normally when you win 4-0 at home against any team in the Premier League, because let's face it, there is no easy game in the Premier League. But it felt weird because it was kind of like everyone expected to beat Everton because they only had 14, recognised first-team players in their squad. What did you make of that Leicester game? Because there was a lot of negativity after that saying, oh, here we go again.
I think, look, it's the first game of the season. Everybody wants to start with a win. I mean, I was very frustrated. We didn't win the game. We deserved to win the game. Although second half, Vardy had a huge chance they won it, and we could have even lost the game. But Spurs for 57 minutes were outstanding. I think Madison said it in his post-match interview after the Everton game yesterday. It's probably the best 60 minutes he's had in a Spurs shirt as a team. He thought the team were brilliant, and I agree. I think, Chris, at the end of the day, right, it's the first game of the season, but it's just unlucky for us that happened in the first game. Every team is going to have games this year where they should get 3 points and don't. And every team this season will probably deserve to get 0 points, and they'll nick out results somewhere. I mean, we only think about the Man City game last year away from home. Spurs were battered and got a 3-3 draw. And then we go, if you think about the week before, we played Aston Villa at home, 1-0 up at half time. Should have been 4 or 5-0 up and lose the game 2-1. Oh, sorry, Villa scored right before half time, last kick of the first half, and Spurs were dominant and actually lost Bentancur in that game as well. But these things do happen regardless of how good you are. Man City lose games they should win. They also sometimes they were fortunate and like a result where they maybe were, like you think about the Spurs Man City game, the home game Spurs had for 45 minutes. Spurs played Man City off the park. Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville says, I've never seen Man City put under this kind of pressure this season. And it was 0-0 at half time. And this was a game that Spurs were trying to lose, as some people says, which was ridiculous. You should play to win a game regardless of who else it favours. But Spurs were outstanding. And Chris, in 38 games, you're going to have games where you should win that you don't. And there might be games where we don't play well and we get a result. So, look, for me, the performance is much more important, especially at this early stage of the season, than a result. I mean, I was so confident we would beat Everton, but we beat Everton in style. Yes, are we looking rusty from set pieces? Of course, and we will have to brush up on that because we've got a big test next week. But the actual general play, Chris, I think is outstanding at times.
Peter writes here, Romero has to be our next captain. I completely agree. If Heung-min Son was to leave the club or Ange Postecoglou wanted to make that change, then I'm sure Romero would be next in line. Roy writes here, Gareth, just look at the bench now, big improvements. Now, we've often spoke on this podcast, certainly in the last couple of years, that we haven't got enough depth or that quality coming off the bench, which it does look like that has certainly changed. And full credit to Postecoglou and Spurs, because in the last 12 months, it is very fair to say that we've offloaded a number of players that needed to go out the door. A number of players have come in the door. And so far in the 3 transfer windows, Ange Postecoglou has been backed. But in the next 5 days, there is only 5 days left of this transfer window. I think most guests, if not all guests, have come on here during this transfer window and said we need some experienced players in. A lot of people have mentioned Ivan Toney. A lot of people have mentioned Eze, to name 2. But where do you stand on it, Gareth? Because Ange Postecoglou has come out many times and said we are stronger now than we were last year.
Well, there's no doubt about that. I think we are stronger. I think we've got rid of a lot of players that weren't part of the future and had also let us down in the past. Your Eric Dyers, your Hugo Lloris's, whilst they were great servants at one point towards the back end of their Spurs careers, they were costing us more than they were. But like we said about Romero later on, yes, Romero has the odd moment, but he hardly ever lets us down compared to how much he pulls us out. And towards the back end of that, Lloris's career, Dyer career, Davidson Sanchez, these were players we'd have money to see come on. Emerson Royale, yes, had the all-good game. Yes, he was probably unfairly criticised at times. But, they were never players who were going to be part of this future. I think a lot when you see that Spurs bench yesterday, minus Solanke, you've got the guts of a really good young squad. I think Archie Gray, Lucas Bergville, I think Ange is doing the right thing. We're hearing a lot of talk about, let's see. I mean, I was watching a lot of people's views, predicted 11s, and people were saying Archie Gray, Lucas Bergville in the midfield. And whilst that is romantic, you have to, as a coach, and maybe I'm speaking from a coach perspective, you have to be realistic. You can't be throwing these boys into the deep end, especially after what happened on Monday night. You have to lean on experience. You've got a Europa League group campaign, or a league phase campaign, as it's now called, coming up, where you will have to rotate the team. You'll get favourable opponents. You'll have cup games. And whilst the cups are important, you might have a League 2 team, League 1 team on there, and you bed them in. You don't want to throw them on at the deep end, maybe 1 or 2, but you don't want to have a young group going away to a team. For example, Newcastle next week, you wouldn't want to see Archie Gray and Lucas Bergville being 3 on, and that's their first game. So it's about patience, Chris. And whilst I've sort of says, I think I says back out in the window, Ivan Toney will be a great signing for Spurs. Obviously, we've signed Solanke, so that's now gone. I think the Eze thing's probably gone as well. But I hate to say it, Chris, and you'll probably be chewing me out here for it, but I think we're probably 1 year away from where we want to be. I think come this time next year, we're probably going to see the team that Ange wants and is ready. Yes, these young players will be, but I still think we'll probably need an hour window to bring in a couple of probably 2 more players that are ready for the start next day. I think Bergville and Gray, whilst they are talented, and whilst we're hearing reports from Alistair Gold that they're impressing Ange, I still think we're probably 12 months away from where we want to be.
Yeah, what does that actually mean though, Gareth? Because I ask you this all the time. where we want to be. Where do we want to be? Because what is the ambition? Because as a Spurs fan, I want to be thinking that we are, good enough to challenge for the title. Is that what you're talking about? Or is it where we want to be in challenging for the top four?
I think we have to walk before we can run, Chris. So I think that's the main thing. I'm expecting Spurs this year still to be competing for the top four. I mean, I think.
So is that where we want to be?
Not right now, but I think this time next year, Ange wants a team. And yes, he'll say in the media that we're competing, and we, if you don't finish first, you're last. And like he made many a point last year towards the back end of the season that 4 for 5 meant nothing to him. Whilst reporters says about you get extra money from the Champions League, he says, look, we're going to do our business regardless of where we finish. And for him, if you don't win the league, you haven't achieved anything, or you don't win a trophy. So I think Ange, whilst he's being bullish in the media, I think that's to change the mentality, because this club has been suffering for too long. There's been too much of a, fourth as a great, as much as Conte had a winning mentality, he says that fourth was a miracle. We're getting a different perception from Ange that, fourth has no achievement at all. So I'm fairly positive.
Does it help, though, when Ange keeps talking about success, winning trophies, and he's not interested in 5th, 4th, 3rd or 2nd, he wants to be number 1? Does that put more pressure on the team, more pressure on him? And does it put more belief and expectation to fans like us that we are going to do some serious business in these transfer windows? Because we've got 5 days left, and I think a lot of people are still asking the question, well, I hate to use the term, and I know a lot of the viewers and the listeners hate these terms of marquee signings, statement signings, whatever you want to call them, game changers. Does that put more expectation on the team and Postecoglou from the fan base?
The only person that puts more pressure on is Ange. He's putting that pressure on himself by saying that, but he truly believes in what he's building at Spurs. This is, Chris, yes. If Spurs were to finish in the top 4 this year, that will be considered a very good season. Ange will say we want to do better. Of course he would. But that will be considered a very good season. I think we're 12 months away in Ange's head from being a team that can compete at the top. I think he needs another summer window. I think, yes, he's having a big say in the transfers. Yes, there's a recruitment team. There's data analysis there. But I think bringing in likes Archie Gray, Odegaard, Bergville, they aren't just signing these players. I mean, Archie Gray costs 40 million. Odegaard costs 30 million. They wouldn't be signing these players just for, they're not cheapskating their way through a window. They're actually spending money. They spent money last year. Yes, Harry Kane left. But, they've had, there's been a massive outlay of money. So there's definitely backing from Daniel Levy and Ange Postecoglou. Well, that's to do with how badly it went under previous managers. But he's been backed more than any manager I've, in my lifetime, in my opinion. Yes, there's an inflated market in terms of how much players are going for. But I mean, we spent 65 on Solanke, 40 on Gray, 30 on Odegaard. And I still think we'll sign at least one more player before Friday. Who that is, I'm not sure of. I said I was speaking to Owen there, who you commented earlier, and a few are my friends. I kind of thought that with the football yesterday and the football today will be quiet. I think from tomorrow until Friday, we're going to get lots of rumours, lots of teams trying to do business. Managers don't want to be getting, as a coach myself, if someone's sort of asking you something when you're coaching a game or preparing for a game, you do not want to be tortured. And that's at a very low level. We're talking about youth football. So Ange Postecoglou will not want to be talking about transfers when he's got a game against Everton they play. We've got no more games before the transfer deadline closes. Yes, we'll be preparing for Newcastle. But I would say from this week onwards, Spurs and a lot of clubs are going to be very busy. I think it could be a very, very hectic last few days of the transfer window for a lot of clubs.
I completely agree. Rabin writes here, Johnson has not performed to expectation, yet we persist. What do we expect from him now? How long can we continue with him if he doesn't perform? What's the alternative to Johnson? Now, as we know, Gareth, you've been on this channel for the last couple of years, and there have been some players that have always been targeted by the Spurs fan base, saying they don't give enough, they don't do this, they don't do that, they're not good enough for this, that and the other. And they need to be sold. Now, of course, this is an Ange Postecoglou player, Brennan Johnson, signed for us last year. Of course, was at the club last season and has featured in both games this season so far. What have you made of Brennan Johnson? And can Ange Postecoglou get the very best out of him?
Look, me and Craig had this debate, I think, last summer when Brennan Johnson's been linked. And look, I was all for Brennan Johnson. I think he's a very talented footballer. I watched him in Nottingham Forest. I think he probably suits counter-attack systems more than he suits a team that are going to dominate possession more. That's not his fault. Yes, he has to get better. I think at times the best way to describe him, he's flaky. I think sometimes his crossing can be very good and then very poor at times. I think his first touch yesterday at times let him down. I thought in the first half against Leicester, Spurs had nothing to do. So if you think about the 10 outfield players, he was the one player that stood out that underperformed. But there is a player there, Chris. I mean, he got 10 assists last year. I think he could have doubled that with better being a bit more productive. But there's definitely a player there. I mean, I do look at this player and think, I don't think he's an Soldado or a Paulinho. Even Lamela was criticised, but Lamela kind of rebuilt his way with the Spurs fans towards after a few years. But I still think Johnson's done more in his first season than a lot of sort of flops. There's definitely a football there. I don't think he's a goal scorer. I know he got 5 goals last year. I don't think he's going to be that man that's going to score 15 goals from out wide. But I think he can definitely hit double figures in assists. And personally, for Solanke, I think Johnson's a dream because he does deliver the ball very early. He doesn't really focus on kind of dribbling and beating 2 or 3 players. If you think about Odegaard yesterday, Odegaard had a very good first half. I think he tired second half, but Odegaard is the type of player that's going to try and dribble his way through, where I think Johnson just wants to get the head down and whoop across on. And I think that's what Ange pointed out, that Odegaard is a totally different player to Johnson. Yeah. But I think Johnson's as a striker's dream. He linked up. Like, how many goals did we see in that sort of spell where we were missing Son for the Asian Cup and we had a few injuries? Johnson was linking up with Richarlison pretty well. So I think Solanke will, he'd be happy if there's a Johnson there, because I don't see Odegaard crossing as many balls for Solanke as maybe what a Johnson would. So I think Johnson's going to be a big part of the future. He's definitely going to improve. He's still only 22, 23. So there's a long way to go with Johnson. I still think he'd be a very important player for Spurs.
Sports Lover writes here, unfortunately, he will be a super sub. Would you prefer to see Brennan Johnson on the sub bench for the majority of the time, Gareth, for Ange Postecoglou to use him as a sub rather than a starter?
It depends, Chris, because I don't think we're blessed with players on that right side. I mean, Cooley, who had that brilliant sort of January to May in his first season, when he came in the January window, was excellent.
Well, let me say, do you know what frustrated me on Monday evening? And I was staying extremely calm about us drawing 1-1 because, of course, first game of the season, I know that there's a lot more to come, and we're going to improve and we're going to get better. But in that game against Leicester, we had Brennan Johnson, who just failed to get that killer pass into the box at the time, and then we replaced him with Timo Werner, who did not take on his man. And that's what really frustrated me. And I was saying to Gary, who was with me on the night, that when you've got players in that final third, and Postecoglou has spoken so often about this in his time in charge so far, Timo Werner, Brennan Johnson, Richarlison, I don't think we can sit here and argue about it. I think it's pretty factual, over the time that they've been at Tottenham, that all 3 of them have been extremely wasteful in front of goal. That needs to improve, doesn't it?
100%, Chris. And look, I think with Kulusevski, because he's so left-footed, he's been found out on that right side. I think Kulusevski recently, in his last sort of 6 months at Spurs, his best performances have kind of come through either as a number 10 or even in pre-season as playing like a false 9. So I think Ange is a wee bit stuck on that right side at the moment. I think, Johnson really is the only option. Odegaard likes to come on side, Werner on the right. It was the first time you've seen Werner on the right. It didn't work. I'm not Timo Werner's biggest fan. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have signed him back. I don't really see the value in him. At 27, he's been drifting really since Chelsea. He hasn't found that form he had before he signed for Chelsea. But he does have that sort of trick where he goes down the left and crosses on his left foot. He couldn't do that on the right side. So whilst I'm a big Ange Postecoglou supporter, I thought that was a really strange substitution. Well, it's because Johnson had such a poor night. He felt he had to change something. But it seems to be that Kulusevski stays on the right-hand side or numbered. And it's going to be either playing as a number 10 or either coming off the bench to play as a number 10, because it seems to be that Ange believes that's his best position now. And I do think that probably is, because I think off that left-hand side, he's so one-footed. But he's got so much quality, Kulusevski. He's a very frustrating footballer. I think he's got such potential to be such a top player, but it's finding that right position for him. And look, I think he had a good game yesterday. I think that is probably going to be where we see Kulusevski. So Brennan Johnson on that right. I think Odegaard, Werner, Son all want to play off the left. It makes the big point about a certain youngster at Spurs. We're going to speak about him, sure, because I'm sure a lot of comments are going to come on about him, that he may well be given opportunities, because if Brennan Johnson isn't doing it, he's the only man to turn to, in my opinion. I don't think Werner is a good player on that right-hand side. I think Odegaard is definitely a player on his right foot, comes in on the left. So I think we're really stuck for options on that right-hand side. And I think Mikey Murray could be given an opportunity.
Hotspur writes here, once we give Will Lancashire a chance, I think he will immediately jump ahead of Richarlison in the depth chart and be pushing Solanke to start. What do you make of that, Gareth? Because it's a huge step up. I'll tell you what, I'm a big Will Lancashire fan, and I think he's going to be a fantastic player for the future. However, that step up from Premier League 2 to the Premier League is absolutely huge, isn't it? What is the best decision to make from a Tottenham point of view for Will Lancashire? Would you hope that he does go out on loan in the next 5 days? It has been reported already by the Press Association that as things stand, it looks like he is going to be part of Ange Postecoglou's squad. He has gone back to the under-21s. He's now out for a couple of weeks with a hamstring issue. But do you think he's going to get enough game time in the first team under Postecoglou, or do you think he will end up playing the majority of football in the under-21s until January, if they then review the situation?
Lancashire stays, because unless we sign a striker before Friday, which I don't think we will, unless we sign Ivan Toney's going somewhere. He's been left out of Brentford's 2 matchday squads, and then the strongest link, is going to Saudi Arabia. But I don't foresee a situation where we've got Richarlison, Solanke, and Toney. As nice as it would be to have all them 3 players as options, I don't see that happening. So we've seen Solanke had an injury. He played 38 games for Bournemouth last season. Gets a freak injury. Apparently somebody stood on his ankle. But Chris, Solanke could get his leg broke next week, and we wouldn't. Freak injuries happen, and then you're relying on an injury-prone Richarlison. But before I get into that, Richarlison for me has been very, very scrutinised. I think he's a very, very good player for what we need at the moment. He scored 12 goals last season. I think he had 19 starts. From November to sort of January, he was on play. He scored in 7 out of 8 games in a row in the Premier League. Yes, he's got his injury problems, but he's a useful player. I mean, we've been crying out for years about having no backup. Chris, name me another team in the league that's got 2 strikers like Spurs do at the moment. You've got, City have just lost Julian Alvarez, so you've only really got Haaland at Man City. Liverpool are playing Jota as a striker. You've got Nunez on the bench, but Jota's not really a striker. He's been converted into a striker because they're short. They have Solanke and Richarlison as options. Is fantastic for a squad that's going to be competing in Europe and the Premier League. And what I'm saying to you is, I don't see Lancashire moving, because we're one freak injury away from, if Solanke was to have a bad injury, you're relying on Richarlison, and Richarlison will not stay fit for 38 games. But like James Madison, they're players that pick up knocks, muscle injuries. So Lancashire will get opportunities, I'm sure of it, because I'm sure at some stage Richarlison will get injured, and Solanke won't be able to play Thursday, Sunday. So Lancashire will definitely get opportunities in the Cups and the Europa League games, especially in the league phase until January. So unless we sign a striker, I would be gobsmacked if Lancashire was to go out on loan.
Got a comment here from Reese, and Reese, thanks so much for all of your input and your incredibly detailed emails that you send me about all the facts and figures to do with Tottenham Hotspur and the financial details. Very, very interesting. So thank you. Reese writes here, Gareth, if you go 3-5-2, you can use Porro as a wing back on the right instead of Brennan Johnson. Are we ever going to see this?
No way, because that's just not how Ange plays. Managers have a certain way of playing, and Ange will not change the system. I mean, Spurs could lose 5 in a row, and Ange will get sacked before he changes. That's just the way Ange is. So you seen it at Man City last year. We went with, what was our midfield? Skip, Lo Celso, and Basuma, and we had a front 3 of Brian Gill, Son, and Kulusevski. And it was Emerson Royal and Davis at centre back, and he still went and tried to beat Man City man for man. Yes, we were lucky enough to get a draw in the second. Thought we played really well second half, but we could have been 5-1 down at half time. Ange will not change. And look, you can be romantic as you want about Lancashire coming in and Moore coming in, and as great as it sounds, Chris, I mean, as a coach and bringing on young players, it's great, but this is the Premier League, Chris. It's ruthless, and you know, you have to back. Which if you start playing these young players too early, you'll ruin them. And it's the same way of Ange. If Ange starts changing his system, Ange is getting the players they believe. And Madison sort of said it. Madison's interview after the Everton game yesterday was fantastic. He says it's about the players trusting the system, and results like yesterday and performances like the Leicester game and today shows you that he knows what he's talking about. Yes, it's risky, but the players are backing him. I don't see any players in there down in tools like they did under Conte. And then there was games where the players were disinterested in the tactics. So even the likes of Van de Ven, Romero at the back, all this pressure on them, Vicario, they're playing through it and they're enjoying it. And as fans, we're enjoying it most weeks. Yes, we've had a few bumps, but Chris, these last sort of 12 months, I've enjoyed watching this kind of football. Will it bring in success? That remains to be seen. But it's such a breath of fresh air.
Gareth, what have you made of Jed Spence being introduced back into the squad? Because it looked like he was going to be sold.
It did. I feel for Jed Spence because, and then was early pre-season games, he looks so good from right back. He looks lost at left back. And, you know, he's Ben Davis. It's clearly obvious now. Ange is seeing him as a centre-back option, and he's fourth on the list. So I think a left back coming in the next 5 days is one of the priority positions. Somebody that can compete, and we're not struggling. I do only see a few Udogie, and Udogie already, we've seen it last season. He's another player that you can't see lasting for the full season. He seems to pick up knocks. I'm not sure about his fitness. I know he didn't have much of a pre-season, but even early last year, he goes down a lot in games, and as good as he's been for us, I'm not sure he's reliable over 38 games plus Europe this season. I think we need a left back that can come on there. I think Jamie Donnelly going out on loan was strange because I thought he'd done well. I know this is a different level, but I think he would have been a good option to play there. So I can only imagine, Chris, we're going to send a left back in the next 5 days because Jed Spence at left back, the right back looks like two different players, and it's very difficult. I watched Brighton against Man United yesterday. I thought Diego Dallo was one of Man United's best players last year in an underperforming team, and he really struggled at left back yesterday against that player they signed from Newcastle, Manta. It's very difficult as a fullback to play on the opposite side.
It's amazing, isn't it, Gareth, how many pundits, ex-players, etc., and fans always say about Ange Postecoglou changing his system. But Ange has said in so many press conferences that he will not change his system. And the journalists still keep asking the questions about playing three at the back, changing systems, etc., etc. That leads me on to talk about Radu Dragushin, because how much game time do you think he's going to get this season? Of course, he turned down Bayern Munich. He's had very limited game time at the club so far. Is it the case that he will just have to wait for cup games such as Carabao Cup and Europa League? Because, of course, Ange Postecoglou did speak a little bit about rotation within the squad. Mickey van der Ven, he mentioned, we can't keep playing him in every single game. You can't be keeping relying on players like that because you have to rotate because he can't play every single minute of every single match, although I think a lot of Spurs fans would like him to. But Radu Dragushin, for you, is it all about the cup competitions, grabbing that opportunity, and when and if one of the players does get injured, he takes the opportunity and goes back into the squad and team?
Well, Chris, see, looking at it, right? He made a big decision coming to Spurs based on Bayern Munich's trajectory and Spurs' history-wise. You go to Bayern Munich, you're guaranteed to win. I know they didn't win anything last year, but that will change very soon. But he probably had less competition at Bayern Munich. I mean, I think Romero and Van de Ven walk on to the Bayern Munich team. They walk on. They would have them two tomorrow. I mean, he was competing with Eric Dyer, De Ligt's going to Man United. Kim has had a really poor season. Upamecano's went backwards. He reminds me of Davison Sanchez at times. So I don't think Bayern Munich have one good centre-back there. Well, they definitely didn't have one good centre-back last year. So he probably had more chance of playing there last year than he did at Spurs. And I think that probably still remains the case. Yes, he's had limited game time, but I've yet to see any evidence that he's better than Romero or Van de Ven. Maybe that's harsh because we haven't seen him enough. but when he has played, and I know it's difficult to come on, especially as a defender or a goalkeeper, when you're kind of under pressure, you make a mistake as a defender or a goalkeeper, it usually results in a goal. But I'm not sure he's suited to this style of play, Chris. I'm a wee bit confused on. I'm making this judgment based on very limited. I haven't seen him enough, but he looks to me like he would have suited that Everton team yesterday, a team that's going to defend. He's a big lad. He's physical. A player that's going to head balls. Flying the attack. Whereas Van de Ven is perfect for this system. He's fast. He can cover. He can play out from the back. Romero can play out from the back. I think Dragusin can be very useful for us. I definitely do think he can. But I think him and probably Ben Davis will be the Europa League centre-back pairing. But when it comes to the crunch, when it comes to sort of knockouts, I mean, you would expect Spurs, they go at least to the last, they go through this league phase. We sort of no issues. You would expect them to qualify in the top 8, and that means they wouldn't play a game to February again in the league phase. But once it gets to the league phase, you've seen Liverpool last year, they went to the quarter-final. They rotated their team against Atalanta, and they were found out. They were beat 3-0 at home, and they were out. They tried, and they won the second leg, but it wasn't enough to turn it around. So come that kind of knockout phase, if you want to win that Europa League, you kind of have to play your strongest team as well. So I think the best opportunity for the likes of Dragusin is going to be the League Cup and the Europa League until Christmas, and then see what happens. I mean, Chris, if you're Ange Postecoglou or a Spurs manager of the past, if Spurs rotate their team in the League Cup and get beat, Ange Postecoglou will be absolutely hammered. But if Spurs play their full strength team against MK Dons and beat them 5-0 and Van de Ven pulls his hamstring, then Spurs fans will say, why are you playing Van de Ven for? He needs a rest. It's a very difficult job management, Chris. It's about, we seen it last year, the Fulham game, Spurs got absolutely hammered for going out of the cup so early. But you do have to rotate your team at some stage. And if Spurs rotate their team in a League Cup game and lose, Ange Postecoglou will be hammered. If he goes full strength and Van de Ven plays the next game on the Saturday and pulls his hamstring, Spurs fans will say, well, he should have been rested. So it's a really difficult job management.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, sorry, but before you come on, I think Spurs is the toughest job in the Premier League at the moment. They're a team that's underperformed for so long. The fans are desperate for silverware. It is the toughest job in English football.
Do you know what, Gareth? I'm going to come to this. It's a shame how it's all worked out, because in the last few years, I tell you what, if you say anything positive about our football club, when we've perhaps drawn the game or lost the game, and you choose to pick out some positives, you get called a happy clapper. And then you get put into two different categories. You're either a happy clapper or you are one of these angry fans that are very negative about the football club. Now, Darren writes here, and Darren, thanks so much for putting this comment here, because there are a lot of people that have said exactly the same thing, and I was definitely going to bring this up in this stream, but you've got to it before me. We battered Leicester City and Everton, but fans still find something to moan about. There are lots of comments saying about that Spurs fans have been whinging. We've played 2 games. We're unbeaten. Yes, we should have beat Leicester, but that wasn't, in my opinion, Ange Postecoglou's fault. That was the front line. We were very wasteful. Ange Postecoglou come out after that game in the press conference and said how frustrating it was and how wasteful we were. I was quite positive after that game, Gareth, and said, there is a lot more to come. Get called a happy clapper, you get put in that category again. How about just a bit of balance? How about just being a bit more realistic about the future of the football club? Because Ange has changed an awful lot at the 12 months that he's been here. Yes, I'm expecting a lot more and hoping for a lot more in the next 5 days in the transfer window if we want to go to that next level. But Gareth, what I wanted to ask you and talk about is, what do you make of this fan divide where you're either one of these guys slagging off everybody, saying everything's terrible, the club is badly run, that we don't do this and we don't do that and we don't go out and spend this amount of money on players, which, how many times have we said about, it's not all about money, it's about the right recruitment. Look at Mickey van der Ven, incredible signing. And a lot of people said, who's this? We wanted Edmund Tapsoba. So it's about balance, isn't it?
Chris, I think the recruitment's been fantastic in the last couple of years. The players we've brought on for so many years, even dating back to Pochettino, even the players he signed, like Clinton and G and Kudu, I mean, there was a lot of debate about he wanted Manny, Wijnaldum. We don't know, but the players that come into the club, Pochettino was part of that recruitment team that was picking the players, and it was really, really poor. I mean, for so many years, we relied on the players that we had. They take us out, and you have to say over the last 12 months, it's hard to believe that Ange Postecoglou's only been here 1 year. The team, the players, the recruitment, the way we're playing, I think we're way ahead of where we. I mean, you think about the Brentford game last year before we lost Harry Kane. I says my friends, if we finish in the top 10 this year, it'll be an achievement because we lost a player to score. I think we scored 70 Premier League goals in
you're right, Gareth. You're right. There wasn't a lot of expectation last year. But let me ask you outright, what is your expectation this year? Because Ange has spent money, as you've mentioned. He keeps saying that he wants to be number one. What's your expectation as a fan now? Because I know you said earlier success would be top 4. Do you think that some people are expecting more than that?
They shouldn't, because we're a long way off Man City and Arsenal. Liverpool, you don't know because they're an unknown, but they still probably have better players than us. Because they've got Van Dijk at the back. He's been there and done it. Salah's a phenomenal. He was our Harry Kane, wasn't he? Salah. So he's consistent every week. He scores today as well. One chance buries it. Liverpool are probably, yes, they're going through a new phase, but it's hard to give any evidence why we should finish above any of them 3. I mean, if you're delusional and it's hard to say. You ask any neutral, can Spurs finish above Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool? There's no evidence to suggest they should. You're looking at Aston Villa, Chelsea, Man United, Newcastle, and that's kind of where we're at, Chris. But obviously, if we were to finish in the top 4 this year, which I think we're more than capable of, I mean, I don't think any of them teams I just mentioned are better than us. I think we're better than we're definitely on a level with Aston Villa. There's 2 points in it last year, and Spurs had horrendous injuries to players. So there's no reason we Aston Villa in the Champions League this year. That should make things more difficult for them. I think we should be competing for top 4. And then if you get to top 4, you should have extra funds. Then it's about closing that gap to the top 4. I mean, Chris, you're talking about a divide in the fan base. There's still so many Arsenal fans that are questioning Michael Arteta. And I hate to bring them up, but he's done a fantastic job at Arsenal. Yes, they haven't got over the line. It's very similar to how we were under Pochettino. Yes, he spent a lot more money, but he's up against a team in Man City that have won probably the best team that's ever graced English football, definitely the Premier League anyway. Obviously, I can't talk about football before my time, but and from what I've seen, I can't remember a team as consistent and as powerful as Man City. So anybody expecting Spurs to be challenging Man City at the moment is just, it's unrealistic, Chris. So we have to be able to walk before we can run. Jurgen Klopp's left Liverpool. Pep Guardiola is coming to an end at Man City. It's about striking at the right time. And with all these young players coming in, you think 12 months on, Chris, there is going to be an opportunity. When Spurs had that opportunity when, Ferguson retired, Man City were struggling to find a manager like Pep Guardiola. Liverpool were struggling. Arsenal were back in the Wenger, and they missed that opportunity when Leicester won the league. Conte come in and trumped them 1 year in a one season. Spurs should have won the league that year. Spurs probably should have won the league 2 years in a row, but they didn't. But that's kind of what we need. We need a gap in the market, and I think we're building towards that. I think patience, and I hate to say it, Chris, patience, but now is the time to be patient and really trust what Ange and the recruitment team's doing, because the signs are positive.
Yeah, I agree. And I know we've spoken a little bit about this before, Gareth, on and off air, that we have to have patience with the manager. I know a lot of people have been and are frustrated by some of the decisions that have been made at board level in recent years under various different managers. But I think with this manager, with this head coach, you do need to have patience. Great comment here from Ravin. And Ravin, thanks so much for your input during this stream so far. Guys, please understand, some people are born whingers and whiners. They will never change. Spurs not the only issue they moan about. They moan about life. We have to accept this. I tell you, I totally agree. I spoke to a number of Spurs fans at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Saturday, And some of the conversations I had, some people even said, if we won a particular trophy, half the fan base would go, "Oh, I don't want that one. We don't want to win that one. We want the other one." So, I support my club, and I tell you what, I'd much rather. I don't care about being put in the happy clapper, folder, whatever you want to call it, compartment, whatever, because I support my football club and I want to win every single game. I want the best for my football club, and I want us to sign the best players. I want the recruitment to be absolutely spot on. I want to have a manager that is going to drive us forward, and I want the players to give absolutely everything, show passion, and give us the results that we want on the pitch. And if that's being a happy clapper, then I am. Gareth, Alan writes here, the next handful of games in September determine if Spurs are a team that have got what it takes to be or to have some serious input this season. Newcastle away, Arsenal at home, Brentford at home, and Manchester United away are our next 4 games, and they are the September games. With those 4 games coming up, Newcastle, Arsenal, Brentford, Manchester United, what are you expecting? Are you worried about the next 2, Newcastle and Arsenal? They are very, very tough, aren't they, in terms of, we haven't even spoken about set pieces yet. It was a big issue at the end of last season. Do you think that has improved? Do you think it's going to improve in the future? Because you've spoken a little bit about the way that Ange plays, his system doesn't change. Do you think that perhaps the set piece situation is going to be another issue going forward this season?
Well, Chris, I'm a big, massive fan of Ange Postecoglou and how he plays, but I will be lying if I say it here. I think it's improved. I think against Everton yesterday, we looked ropey from set pieces. There wasn't that many of them, but there was a period at the end of the first half where I think there was a succession of 3 or 4 corners, and we looked shaky from every one of them. I don't know if this is Ange or the coaching staff or a personal decision from Vicario, but he hasn't been coming off his line at all. Whether that's because he's been told to do it, to stay put. But the worry is, I'm not so confident that our players are physical or brave enough. I don't want to say brave. They're brave enough to get on the ball and play, but I think set piece wise, we're weak in terms of our players going for sort of the clear balls, and Vicario's rooted to the spot. And hey, if anybody meets a header, if you're a goalkeeper on that anywhere else in the net, if you're rooted to your spot, you're in trouble. So I would really worry about that. That's my main issue. From set pieces, I'm getting any corner, any free kick, I'm panicking at the moment. I'm really panicking. And you will be lying if he says you weren't. Even the most happy Spurs fans, and I am a happy one at the moment. You know me, Chris. We met during the COVID with Jose Mourinho and Conte, and I used to turn up the Spurs games and used to say to me, go on smile with you, because I was so miserable, because I was going out of loyalty more than enjoyment. But I mean, I was over so many times last year, and even when we weren't, we had a bit of a bad run, I was kind of still positive because I liked the way we were playing. But that set piece problem is a huge issue, and it doesn't look like it's been fixed. And teams are going to target that because we're dominant in teams, possession wise, chances. I can't think of too many games where we're not creating more chances than the opposition. Even the Arsenal game last year when they were going for the league, I thought we were the better team on the day, but we conceded 3 awful goals in the first half, and it was never a 3-0 game. And Spurs second half brought the scoreline back, but I mean, we should have definitely got at least a draw in that game. But we were undone by counterattacks and set pieces, and that still remains an issue. And if you look at our last 2 visits to Newcastle, Chris, and I'm sure you were there, I think it's 10-1 on aggregate, and we were exposed. I know 2 different managers, but I think that was the worst defeat of last season, the Newcastle game, because we played into their hands, and Newcastle's front 3 are dangerous. You've got Isak. It was the only game Mickey van de Ven has found out everybody can have a bad game. I'm not expecting him to do that this weekend or next weekend against Newcastle. He will never be that bad again in a Spurs shirt. I think we can see 2 goals in the space of 2 minutes, and he was at fault for 2 of them. I think he was probably still wondering what happened with the first goal, and before you know it was 2-0 and the game was over, and we were really, really punished. I don't see that happening again this weekend, but they do have so much quality on the break. You've got Harvey Barnes, Anthony Gordon, and Isak. It's as good as a front 3 as you'll play outside of the top 3 all season. So we're going to have to be on our game in that midfield, and I think Basuma is going to have a huge job on his hands on Sunday. He has to be there. They plug them gaps and plug them holes because, as we said, Chris, for the last 49 minutes, Ange won't change. He's going to go there and expect the team to be better, be ruthless, and put our chances away. Because up until that first goal against Newcastle, Chris, Spurs were probably the better team, and they conceded 2 goals for half time, and second half was a non-event. They capitulated in a way, but it kind of happened to Brighton too, if you remember. But we pulled a couple of goals back towards the end. But that was worrying. That the worry is if we were to go to Newcastle and they were to breach us early on, and the confidence of can they turn that around, because we've got players in that squad that were there for the last 2 games, and they will remember, and Van de Ven will remember what happened last year. So it's a big test on Sunday. I'm not too worried about the Arsenal game, because obviously Arsenal are a fantastic team, but it's an North London derby. Kind of form goes out the window. Both teams are going to go at it, and you look at the Arsenal games over the last few years, they're always tight. Other than that Conte season, where Stellini come on every other year, even when they were struggling under Wenger, and even when times that we were struggling in the 90s and Wenger's teams were flying, they're always tight games. So the Arsenal game will take care of itself. And Newcastle is a huge test on Sunday based on what's happened in the last 2 years.
Absolutely, Gareth. Huge test. Now, Lee Ennis writes here, banging performance. Spurs 4, Everton 0. Liam writes, poor opposition in 2 games. Keep your trumpets quiet. Russell Bartram writes, look, next 2 games are massive. We haven't played anyone good yet. Chubb Bates says, I'm still backing Ange Postecoglou all the way. Gareth, these next 2 games are absolutely huge, because it's fair to say, and no disrespect to Leicester or Everton, but they will be completely different. Newcastle, of course, played Sunday afternoon against Bournemouth. They didn't look that great, if I'm honest, but I think it will be a very, very different game at St James's Park next Sunday when Spurs are in town. The Arsenal game is going to be very difficult, and as you've already mentioned, the last 2 results at St James's Park against Newcastle, a 6-1 defeat and a 4-0 defeat. So Ange Postecoglou is certainly going to want to go and get something there.
Sorry, Chris. If you look at Newcastle away from home last year, they were very poor most of the season. And the first game they played Southampton this year, they were down 10 men and they had to play a different way to win. Newcastle at home, Spurs going to Newcastle away is as tough as it gets outside of Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, in my opinion. They beat Spurs, Aston Villa, Man United. Man City done them in the last minute there last year with that fantastic De Bruyne pass. Liverpool were in a fluke result, scored 2 goals in the last 5 minutes last year. Newcastle beat most teams at home, or a minimum take a point. They do not usually lose at home since they've kind of had this takeover. They've been fantastic at home, even against the bigger sides when they're second favourites. So this I wouldn't be reading too much into what happened to Newcastle today. Newcastle will be a different team next week, and they sort of go back. Chris, we could beat Newcastle next week, beat Arsenal, and wouldn't change my expectations. Some Spurs fans will go, oh, we can win the league. Some Spurs, we could lose these 2 games, and people say, oh, won't make top 6.
It's very black and white, Gareth, isn't it? Because we've had this so often before, certainly in the last couple of years. And that's why I think that Spurs fans get bantered so much. You win a couple of games, everyone's saying, oh my God, we're going to win the league. And then there's like real belief, we're going to win the league. And it's capable.
We are
be realistic.
Exactly. We are capable of going to Newcastle next week and winning. And we're definitely, in the 2 games against Arsenal last year, Spurs were the better team. Even Arsenal fans would, even obviously the most delusional and the most sort of biased, but Spurs went to Arsenal last year, early on in Ange's sort of Spurs career, and that second half, they were the most likely winner. And if you think about the game at White Hart, the Spurs Stadium, the first 30 minutes, the Arsenal couldn't get out of their own final third. And even in that second half, it was all Spurs. And I think we're definitely capable of winning these next 2 games, but it wouldn't change my sort of season expectations of where I think we're going to be. I think consistency is going to be a big issue. And injury-wise, we don't have the squads of the other teams. But look, I'm confident going. Am I sort of fearing these? No way. Since Ange has come on, Ange proved that in his first few games, going to Man United second game, beating Man United, going to Arsenal when Arsenal were flying, getting a draw, going to beating Liverpool at home. Yes, VAR played a part, but early on, the Chelsea game. I was at the Chelsea game, and only for a minimal offside, Spurs were 2-0 up, and Chelsea couldn't cope with Spurs. And God knows what would have happened last season. I'm not saying we'd have won the league, but when I thought Spurs went 2-0 up against Chelsea 11 games into the season, playing the football they were, with all their players fit, I was thinking this is a very special team, and that team still exists.
I've got to admit, Gareth, I still feel like I did a couple of weeks ago. I still feel like we need a couple more experienced players in this squad, because a couple of key injuries, very similar to last year, if we have that again this year, it could derail our season, bearing in mind we will be playing at least 8 more games in European competition, and hopefully we'll go a lot further, as you mentioned, out in the out in August in the League Cup last year, and hopefully we'll go further in the FA Cup as well. Mandy writes here, Chris and Gareth, what are you on about? Ange is not a Tottenham manager. He should have stayed at Celtic. His tactics won't win anything. What do you make of all the negativity about Ange Postecoglou? Because when we drew 1-1 at Leicester, we were getting all sorts of comments in, Gareth, on this stream. When we did one of the other episodes of the questions and comments, people even saying Ange Postecoglou is nothing but a PE teacher.
I think that's crazy, because I haven't enjoyed watching Spurs in the last sort of 4. Chris, I don't know what you use, an away fan. You go to every game, home and away. Even when we go now and play.
Well, let me say that, right? Because my belief is that, for someone who follows Spurs home and away, if I was leaving my house genuinely thinking, right, we're going to lose today, I tell you what, I wouldn't get in my car. I wouldn't go. And for someone like you who travels a long way coming from Ireland to come to London to watch Spurs, have you ever had that attitude? Have you ever left Ireland thinking, oh, I'm going to Tottenham, but we're going to lose? Because I tell you what, if you do, what's the point? You've got to believe in your club.
Well, they bring balance on it. I do think there is times you go thinking it might be different, but I mean, Chris, you couldn't, under Conte, times you must have felt that it was going to be a long day and we're going to have to sit back, defend. Whereas I look at Spurs now, they're going to try and win. They're going to go on the front foot. They're going to, when we lose, I think there's a belief that we'll learn from it. Whereas under sort of previous managers, I kind of feel that we'll sit back, soak up pressure, and hope Harry Kane pings a pass to Son will nick a result. I didn't really see any plan on it. I kind of felt that it was kind of relying on luck, relying on Harry Kane and Son being at their best. Whereas I don't think last season Spurs relied on one singular player. Yes, when Van de Ven and Madison got injured, there was a huge gap in the squad. We still won games, Chris. We still, Son was our top goal scorer with 17 goals in the league last year. Goals came from left, right, and centre. There was no reliance on one player. Son went missing for a month or two with the Asian Cup. Richarlison stepped up. Spurs are developing a style of play that suits the group, not sort of focusing on one or two players. They pull you out of trouble. And I kind of felt that was the way since Pochettino left, that Spurs were relying on the Harry Kane. They score 30 goals and Son, they scored 20 goals. And the style of play was terrible to watch. And Chris, you're a lifelong fan. Spurs were in League Two, you go much. And that is probably where a lot of fans are sort of, they exploit loyalty, and I understand that. But I came over to Ireland so many times and under Conte, Mourinho, and I was sorry, not so much Mourinho because the COVID, but Conte and I, and thinking, I'm hoping Spurs can play well, and I'm hoping they can sort of change, but it was never going to. Whereas under Ange, Chris, I went over 7 times last year. I went as much as I could, because not so much that I believe we could win, yes, but I enjoyed watching the team, even when they lost. Like I went to 7 home games last year. They won 6 of them. The only game they lost was the Chelsea game. And even in that Chelsea game, whilst the tactics were crazy, they still tried. They won the game with 9 men. And I think, as people might say, it's stupid, but it's brave. And I want my football team to be brave. And if that's the foundations of the club, then it's so much easier to get behind.
Gareth, I see that a lot. When Spurs are doing really well, everyone wants a ticket. Everyone wants to go. And then when Spurs are not doing so well and we're going through tough times, different managers, etc., these people are nowhere to be seen, and then you see a different set of fans. And then when Spurs are doing well again, you see those same people back again.
Sorry, Chris. It wasn't so much that we were doing well. I think I came to a game last year. We lost 3 in a row. It's more the way we're trying to play, not so much
entertaining football, if you like, yeah. But you're absolutely right. If Spurs were in League Two on a Tuesday night away at Rochdale, I would be there. You know that.
I would be at a home game against Swindon Town. I would go because I'm a Spurs fan day to day, regardless of where we are. So, look,
exactly.
That's just the way football works. But I think we're in such a better place now compared to where we were a few years ago.
Yeah. There's no point talking about us in League Two. That's not happening. Thompson 1904 writes here, it's got to be Wilson right wing, Son left wing, with Richarlison and Dominic Solanke up front for Newcastle. Johnson is way off the pace. A lot of I could have read out so many Johnson comments on this stream, Gareth, which would have been extremely unfair. But we've spoken about him at length on this stream so far. Richarlison, Dominic Solanke up front for Newcastle. Do you think that Ange will go again with Odegaard in the starting 11 for Newcastle?
I don't think he will, because I think you have to bring Sarr into the team, because I think with Joelinton, Bruno Guimaraes and Sean Longstaff, they're going to be very physical in there. And I think we need a bit more in there in terms of Sarr being, he's a physical player. Basuma will play. And Madison will be the other player in there. So I think Kulusevski will be shifted out to the right wing. Yes, it's not his favourite position, but I think Johnson will be benched. I think Song comes in at the left. He drops out to the left. He won't be playing as a striker. And I think if Solanke's fit, he plays. If not, Richarlison plays. I think we'll go that's the way we'll go. I think the back five picks itself. I can see Sarr coming in and Kulusevski coming in as well on the right-hand side.
Richard C. Griffiths writes here, Odegaard did everything he should and more. So would that be harsh on him, or is just this the nature of football that, sometimes you've got to rotate?
I thought he was very good in the first half. I thought he was awful in the second half. I thought he was a liability at times, and that's maybe been it's his first game. I thought second half he tired physically, and there was one stage he played a hospital pass inside when he conceded a goal. I thought he done very well first 45 minutes, but this is a level up. This is Newcastle. So I think we have to go way more trusted. I think it would be criminal to play a midfield of Basuma, Kulusevski and Madison. That would be questionable for Ange, because I think Kulusevski and Madison are very attacking players. I think we do need more stability in there for Newcastle away. Yes, I love it. Don't change the attacking football, but we need a lot more security in there, because Newcastle will break, and they will break fast. Newcastle will let us have the ball, and they will wait for the traps, and they will go, let's go, because Udogie and Porro will push forward. And if Basuma's sitting there with Romero out on the right and Van de Ven, they'll rip us apart again if we're not clinical up front. So Ange, whilst he's bullish, he's not stupid. He will know that if Spurs go there thinking it's Everton and we'll roll them over, we're in for a huge shock if we're not clinical. Yes, if we're clinical, it'll work. But if we're not, Newcastle will definitely score goals again. I think we'll need to score 3 goals next week. They won. I think we'll need to get 2 goals to get a draw. I can see us conceding at least 2 next week because of the gaps. Not so much of us being poor, just of how we play. The risk and the rewards, they will have to score a few goals to get a result. So I can imagine that Sarr comes in and Kulusevski will be shifted out the right-hand side, because his performances in pre-season, and he's done more than Johnson in the game yesterday that he has to play, and Song goes back to the left, and it's either Richarlison or Solanke up front.
It's been a couple of very difficult trips these last couple of years, Gareth, that we've already mentioned, 6-1 and 4-0 at St James's Park. Steve Dyer on Facebook writes here, just need a positive performance against Newcastle. We can't lose heavily again. It's important to the fans, isn't it? Of course, games like this, it's a huge game. And as I say, I think that a lot of people expected not only a win, but a good win and a good performance at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium against Everton. We certainly got that. And I feel like most of the fan base was kind of like, okay, job done, tick, now on to the big ones, now on to Newcastle, now on to Arsenal. With this Newcastle game, I know you've spoken a little bit about what you think Ange Postecoglou will do. Are you feeling confident, though, in this game? Because Newcastle, St James's Park, that stadium gets absolutely rocking up there. And it is a difficult place to go, isn't it?
Of course it is. It's a difficult place for anything to go. And Newcastle players, fans, they'll be confident after the last 2 Spurs visits. They'll be thinking 3 points. But they will be patient, because if you remember the game last year, up until the Newcastle goal, Spurs were dominant in the game in terms of possession. We didn't really create clear cut. There's a chance for Werner. It was a half chance, but Spurs were on the front foot. Newcastle will be happy to sit back, and the fans will know why they're sitting back, because they know the best way to beat Spurs is counter-attack and wait for the gaps and wait for the Spurs to make a slag pass or catch them out on the break. So they'll be pretty patient. It is. I get the comment from who was it there that says about a positive performance. I'm not sure who was. Whoever put it on, that was a positive. I do think a positive performance is needed, but if we lose the game 2-1, no one's going to feel any better than losing 4-0, because it's 0 points.
It was Steve. Gareth, Mofo writes here, interesting to see who Ange chooses for the third midfielder against Newcastle. And also what I wanted to ask you is, there's so much talk about a number 6. Spurs fans want Ange Postecoglou and the club to sign a new number 6. It doesn't look like that's going to happen.
No.
It's not a priority for Spurs, according to various reports from very reliable journalists. If that doesn't happen, who is the best number 6? Who is the best player in that position for this season for you?
Sorry, Chris, I'll answer all 3 questions there. The first question, sorry, about Newcastle. Yes, I am confident, because on our day we can beat anybody. The number 6 won't happen. I don't see a situation where we sign anybody in that position now, because RG Gray's come on as part of the future. You've got Bentancur that can play there, Basuma that Ange is a big fan of. Yes, he made a mistake. I'm hoping that mistake Basuma made is a good thing, because I think now that's the best I've seen Basuma play since before he got that red card against Luton. I thought it was a different Basuma. A player that, like Kulusevski, is very frustrating, because you know he's got that ability. I think I was on after the Hearts game in pre-season, Chris, with you, and I was very critical of his performance. And I'm critical of him because of how much ability he has got, the potential to be a world-class number 6. But for whatever reason, he's inconsistent, arrogant, cocky at times. How many times does he miscontrol the ball, be taking his eye off it, and very lax? And he's got so much ability. And I think Ange sort of says in the media, you're 26, he's 26 now, this is his peak. He's got to be more consistent. And if you get the Basuma, that sort of the first 10 games of last year, you've got such a player in there, you mightn't even need a number 6. But the one player I would love us to sign, and we were kind of linked with him, but it looks like that's fallen on deaf ears, is João Gomes from Wolves, 23, Portuguese international. He's played for Portugal, and they're littered with midfielders. You think about the players Portugal have, but that seems to have gone on deaf ears. He's got Premier League experience, but Wolves are kind of struggling for money. So I don't see that happening. I think if we sign anyone, Chris, it'll be a left back, possibly a defender.
Yeah, I don't think that was a goer in the first place, Gareth. I think that was a lot.
Personally, that would be my preference, but I think he would be a fantastic signing.
Yeah, I've been told by a number of Wolves fans between 60 and 80 million pounds, not going to happen. Calvin writes here, Kulusevski always goes at his defender and most of the time beats them. People don't say it, recognise him enough for that. Is he a player that gets a lot of criticism, that is harsh?
On his day, I agree with that comment. There's plenty of hours he can't beat anyone, and he's very predictable left foot. His goal output is very poor for a player that plays in that position. I remember his first 6 months at Spurs. How many times did he cut on that left foot and put it on the top corner? Last season, there was balls going. It wasn't even close. It was hitting the backboard in the stand. You know, leaning back. I'm not sure if it's a confidence issue. I think because he is so left-footed. I mean, he scored that goal against Nottingham Forest, didn't he, last year? He's right-footed. I think that it might be the only right-footed goal I can remember him scoring. And let's be honest, the keeper should have saved it. He fumbled it on the net. So he's very predictable. Defenders have sort of, his first 6 months, they probably didn't know much about him. So he got away with it. But I don't think he's a right-wing player, because I don't think he's quick enough. You look at a Saka and a Salah, they're very left-footed as well, but they're so quick with how they move their feet, and piss. They can kind of get away with it. It's a bit like when Arjen Robben was like Bayern Munich and Chelsea. He was a bit like Kulusevski, same type of player, but he was clever enough that he was able to maneuver his way into that position. I'm just not sure with Kulusevski on that right foot or on that right side. He's as good as what they were. So I think when he plays for the middle, he looks much a better player. I mean, I think a bit like as I said about Basuma, Chris, so much potential in Kulusevski. He could be a really, really top player.
Yeah.
But at the moment, his career is probably stagnated because for all the criticism about Brennan Johnson, if Kulusevski isn't doing enough to get a position over him, it tells you everything.
It seems quite harsh on Kulusevski, though, Gareth, in my opinion, because he was one of the standout performers during pre-season. Of course, we come back to Premier League, and then he's on the sub bench for the Leicester game.
I can't agree with that, but he was kind of playing as a false nine during pre-season, and it was probably
but we know that he can play in a number of different positions, and Ange Postecoglou loves that, doesn't he? He loves that versatility of players.
Well, that's it. But sometimes, do you want a perfectionist or do you want a jack of all trades? And yes, he's versatile, but maybe Ange doesn't see him as better than Brennan Johnson on that right-hand side. Maybe he doesn't see him as better than Madison and the number 10 role. And maybe he doesn't see him as better than Solanke or Son through the middle. And I think that might be the problem, Chris. I'm a big fan. I think we should definitely keep him. I think he's a very, very useful, talented player that has definitely got the potential to be better. But it's where he plays.
Yeah. Marcus writes here, he was superb against Everton. The lead up to the Basuma goal was excellent. Couldn't agree more, Marcus.
Chris, sorry, I just need a quick toilet break. I'll be back in 30 seconds if that's okay.
No problem. No problem. Please do get all of your comments in and get as many questions in as possible because I'll put them to Gareth and we'll discuss everything in the next 15, 20 minutes or so. Thanks so much for all of your support so far, and literally hundreds and thousands of comments have come in the last couple of days, so really appreciate that. Jules writes here, Ange proving that plan A, better, is the best plan B. Adam Ski 4737 writes here, Ange Postecoglou has turned into an arrogant, unhappy man. I think that's very harsh. I think that Ange Postecoglou constantly wants the very best at Spurs. He did look very unhappy, I must say, after the Leicester game. But there were a lot of unhappy Spurs fans after that Leicester game because we were so wasteful in front of goal, which we've already discussed. And I've put that out on a number of Tottenham news videos since Monday evening. Keith writes here, mad to let Manor Solomon go even on loan. He is a very good player. We've had a lot of comments about the loan of Manor Solomon. Of course, Spurs have had a number of players go out the door in this transfer window. Gareth, let me come to you on that. Keith says that it's mad to let Manor Solomon go out on loan. He's a good player. Are you surprised by this one?
Do you know what? I Chris, it's going back to I don't want to be critical of the viewer. He's entitled to his opinion, as is everyone. It's not just Keith. There's a lot of people saying this about Manor Solomon because what has he done in a Spurs shirt to suggest that he would be a useful player?
He's had a lot of injury problems, and that's the other point. Is it fair to now let a player like that go out on loan without really getting a chance because he's had a lot of injury issues? That guy here says, and I'm not just saying that guy, that is the name of the viewer. I just can't see how Timo Werner is better than Manor Solomon. He was a first team pick at the start of last season, for example, at Burnley. It's a good point, isn't it?
It is, but it's probably the only game he done anything decent. From watching him in pre-season, as much as I'm a critic of Werner, I think Werner's got more potential to be more useful in the squad. And the answer to the question is, if Solomon plays over Mikey Moore, people will go crazy. Why is Mikey Moore not getting an opportunity? Maybe Solomon's going because Mikey Moore's getting an opportunity. You have to realize that there's a lot of decisions being weighed up. Mikey Moore, I do think he's probably better on the left, but and during pre-season he played a lot on the right. And as we spoke about earlier, Chris, there's not a lot of options unless Kulusevski's shifted back out there. I think he maybe shifted out there this weekend. because we need more stability in midfield. But I think when it comes to Europa League games, Kulusevski will play in the middle and Mikey Murray will play on the right. I think Mikey Murray's going to have a lot of games this year in the Europa League and the Cups.
I was going to ask that because is that the way that Ange is going to do it, do you think? Because in the first couple of games, it has been as expected. Do you think a lot of these youngsters will get game time? Because it's fair enough putting them in during pre-season, but the Premier League is a completely different level. Do you think that they will get minutes in the Premier League?
Well, that's up, but it's just because the season's only started. We've only had one game a week, so you're going to play your best 11, or you think what your best 11 is. So, when the Europa League starts and you've got the League Cup starting in September and you've got the Premier League, you're going to have 3 competitions. At the moment, we're only in one competition because the other ones haven't started. So every team's going to play their kind of strongest 11 up until them competition starts. So yeah, I wouldn't be panicking. I mean, Solomon going to Leeds on loan tells you where he's at. Why is no Premier League clubs looking for him? Because he's probably not good enough. He was a free transfer. Spurs were short last year. They had a bit of expenditure on certain players like Van de Ven and Madison, Brennan Johnson, for example. So he was on there as a stopgap, and if they were injured, and Timo Werner's probably doing the same. But as much as I'm a critic of Timo Werner, I would still rather have him than Solomon, because I watched them at Fulham. I wasn't that impressed, and I watched them for Spurs, and even in pre-season, I thought he was poor. So look, I hope he proves me wrong and as well at Leeds, but I wouldn't be getting the tissues out for I'm going to Leeds.
What about Solanke? Glenn writes here, Solanke has been injury-free for 4 years. He joins Spurs and gets injured instantly. I tell you, are we cursed in some sort of way, Gareth? Because, players like this, like Glenn says, injury-free all that time, joins Spurs, plays one game. I know it's only one game, or hopefully it's only one game he's going to be missing, the Everton game, and hopefully he's going to be back for Newcastle. But, a lot of people were very frustrated, weren't they, when the Ange Postecoglou presser come out?
I'll tell you a funny story, Chris, because I was beginning to think the same as Glenn there. And I do think we are a cursed club, because you look at some of the decisions in big games at times and cup finals, and you always think about that Champions League final, 30 seconds and conceding a penalty that was dubious at best. But when Solanke got injured and Van de Ven had that freak incident on Saturday, I just says, I'm turning the TV off. I'm going to turn it back on, and Van de Ven's going to be walking again, because I was frustrated because of how well we were on top, and just thinking something goes wrong. I turned the TV off for 2 minutes and turned it back on, and Van de Ven was back on the pitch, and it was great, because I just couldn't cope with him being injured again. But Solanke, yes, it may seem like we're cursed, but it was a freak injury. Somebody stood in his foot, it swole up on the training session the next day or the next 2 days after, and look, that can happen. The good news is he could be back this weekend. If he's not back, he's back for Arsenal. We coped on Saturday, so technically it wasn't a big loss. But when you're signing for such big money, you kind of want them to get that first goal as soon as possible. And yes, he didn't play on Saturday, but it's an hour game on the season, and he had a few chances against Leicester. Probably only one big chance where he was disappointed about. The other ones were kind of half chances, but I thought his overall play was good. So I'm hoping he's in the team this Sunday. If not, I'm still on the Richarlison bandwagon that he can be useful. So any team that's got a second striker as good as Richarlison, or have a good day. As I said, Chris, go through the teams. There's not too many teams that have a good second striker like Spurs do with Richarlison. So I think we've 2 good strikers there that can score goals.
Roy Price writes here, well done to Ben Davies, 10 years with Spurs. What have you made of Ben Davies' 10 years at the club, Gareth?
Look, really, really good servant. I do think it's time to move him on. I'm not sure how long's left on his contract. He signed that many contracts in the 10 years. He was kind of a favourite of all, man. He's probably...
This is last year.
So probably, apart from Eric Dyer and Harry Kane, and Lloris was kind of the only goalkeeper, he's probably been the most favourite picked player of every manager. You think he played under every manager. He didn't really have a spell out. Left back, as a playing as the left side of a back three, or even last season playing as part of a back two when there was injuries. I think he's seen as someone a bit like a James Milner when he was at Liverpool and Man City, and he's almost a bit of a great character to have around the club, and he doesn't cause any problems. But I really think it is time to move him on, because we're getting to the stage now where he's going to be getting his pension.
Mark writes here, we want football success. Luca Manamila says, but the question is, are Spurs fans happy? How can you be the best run club in England without satisfaction of the fans? Steve Marcos writes here, is there a trophy for that? Sign Eze. And
there's
Jackie says,
fans. Chris,
one second. And then Jackie says, not on the pitch, that is for sure. Those comments are relating to me putting a video out a couple of days ago where Spurs were named the best run club in the Premier League, Gareth. What does this mean to you? What does that title mean to you as a Spurs fan, best run club in the Premier League? Because a lot of fans, including me, we all judge teams on success. We haven't had a trophy since 2008. I know we've already spoken about the last 12 months under Ange Postecoglou, and the recruitment just a little bit before that has been so much better than it has been in recent years. But what do you make of the title of best run club in the Premier League?
I actually read the report, and it is relating to PSR and sustainability rules. Not so much about trophies, or it's basically as a business, we're in really good shape. Chris, there's an up and down to this. A lot of fans, like myself, like you, are very frustrated at the lack of success on the pitch. But this really, since this is happening before Daniel Levy and arrived, there's been Spurs really since the 80s have been drifting. Really since that UEFA Cup one in '84. There's been very little. There's been an FA Cup in '91. There's been a couple of League Cups, but it's not been it's not just Daniel Levy, not unique, and I'm not their biggest supporters. But there is a plan in place. There's no doubt. You don't build a £1 billion stadium. You don't have all this stuff going on off the pitch. Of course, there's an element of business and profit. Every business is. We're fools if we sit here and think if I was to buy a football club tomorrow, I want to make profit. And that's, everybody would be lying if they said they didn't. Everybody that works, loves, breathes, wants to make a profit. They want to have a good. So, what they've done for Spurs off the pitch leaves them in a really good position. I mean, Chris, we spent quite a bit of money in this transfer window. There's a lot of clubs scraping. They comply with the rules. We're not in that situation. Maybe that's because we haven't been ambitious enough over the past few years. But I think we've had a relatively good window in terms of we've shifted a lot of the deadwood. I know Ben Davis, somebody says is deadwood as well, but they've got decent fees for players I don't think are part of the future. So I do think if the window ends tonight, if we're coming off air in 2 years' time in the transfer window, I still think it's been a positive window. Yes, we want something more in the next few days, but Chris, we're in a really, really good place. I think the next few years could be really successful. It's about getting that first trophy over the line and building on it. Yeah. I think Ange has said it's no good winning a League Cup this year and disappearing for 10 years again. That's not what this club is about. Or, yes, we're desperate for success, but we want sustained success, that we're able to be at the top table, challenge. And look, over the last few years, I think a lot of people have. It's difficult to be critical of what they've spent, because if you look at the players that's come in, maybe that's the issue, that they believe we should be going for world-class footballers over sort of young potential talents. Brennan Johnson's, Udeberg, Van de Ven was he's been brilliant, but he was another player people didn't know much about. It's a long time since Gareth Bale came back on loan. Apart from that, you could probably go back to Van der Vaart. He was the last sort of world-class or have been world-class player that come in the club. So it's just not what we're about. But, look, Liverpool fans are huge here in Ireland, Chris. A lot of my friends are Liverpool fans, and they have the same sort of gripe with their owners. They haven't spent a penny in this transfer window, and if they don't sign somebody in the next 5 days, they're going to be the second team since transfer windows opened. The law come in that you had to sign players within a specific window. I think it was 2003. Spurs were the first team. They go through a whole summer window without signing a player. They're 5 days away from doing the same. So, look, they're a huge club, but for whatever reason, they're not doing it, and they've had the same issues that we had up until the last couple of years, where they've been unable to shift players for good fees. We sold Harry Kane, and we were gutted about it, but Harry Kane's allowed the likes of Van de Ven, Udogie, Madison. They rebuild. Liverpool turned down 150 million for Salah last year, and he's probably going to walk for free next year. And they didn't win anything last year, and they may not win anything this year. And that 150 million, then they have to try and replace Salah next year if he goes in free. So look, it's very difficult. These new PSR rules make it extremely difficult to do transfers. I don't think transfers have been more difficult than they've ever been. And it's just about trusting the club. They do things right. And I think the squad we've assembled at the minute, Chris, now, these young players, even if somebody comes on like a Real Madrid, like a Man City, like a Bayern Munich, they're going to go for huge money, and there'll be money there to replace and so on. So I think we're doing things right. It's just about being patient now, and we kind of have to forget about the last sort of 5 or 6 years and really sort of start from ground zero and think about how many trophies can we win in the next 5 years. And I know it's difficult because of the transfer window, but
I think a lot of people hate that term or that word patient, because I think that some fans are very, very frustrated by that term. But I do agree that we need to be patient under this manager.
Sorry, Chris, before you go on, Leslie Crawford's just correct. I mean, yes, Liverpool did win the Carabao Cup last year. I almost forgot about that, but you chat to Liverpool fans, they weren't happy with that. They didn't see that as a big success. So I kind of feel the same for us, Chris, unless, yes, we would take the League Cup, but I think Spurs want to be competing. They won the Premier League, Europa League, obviously want to be in the Champions League, but I think if we won the League Cup, it would kind of be looked down at by a lot of our fans. I think we need to win an FA Cup or a Europa League to be kind of considered as being back. A League Cup wouldn't probably do it. Yes, I would take it, but I don't think a lot of fans, the media, opposition fans wouldn't take any notice of it.
Yeah, like I said, whatever trophy we win next, a lot of our fans, a lot of the fan base, a lot of opposition fans, a lot of the pundits will get bantered for it not being the right trophy. But did West Ham United, did they get bantered for winning the Europa Conference League? Absolutely not. Marcus writes here, do you think that Amanda Staveley will get her £650 million stake into Spurs? Of course, she's just left Newcastle United. There has been a report from the Sun newspaper today about she could be investing £650 million into Tottenham. Personally, for me, Gareth, I cannot see this happening, because I think someone like her, and of course her husband, will want a lot of control, a lot of say what would happen at Tottenham, and I just cannot see that happening or working. What are your thoughts?
Look, personally, I think if you're really, really against Enoch and Daniel Levy, then you're going to have to suck it up, because I can't see them going anywhere anytime soon. This is a business that's booming. Who in their right mind would sell when you're making so much money? Spurs are probably making more money on a match day than any other team in England. They've got so many more events than any other team. They've got a young, profitable squad now that can turn. I mean, if Lucas Bergvall turns out to be as good as what we think he could be a £100 million footballer. And Spurs have got so many things going for them. I just don't see Spurs selling up any part of the club. I think they're Staveley, yes, will want the control. I mean, Newcastle didn't last very long, did it? They wanted too much control there. They were shifted. And also the fact that, let's be honest, as good as Newcastle did, they got into the top 4, they left them in a mess. Newcastle are now struggling because they spent that much money. They didn't really look at the rules. Newcastle had to sell players on June the 30th. Eddie Houses, they didn't want to sell. They can't sign anybody because they have to sell Isak or Gordon. They sign a player and they want to keep them players. Look, Newcastle had a great season. They finished 4th, but it's realistically they're stuck and they can't really spend because they have to sell. So look, these new rules are going to make it very, very difficult. Man City come in at a time, and Chelsea before that under Abramovich come in at a time where there was no rules and it was an open checkbook. Ask Chris. I'd love to ask. I know we're going to be finishing up soon, but I'd love to ask everybody watching: would you rather be Spurs right now or Chelsea right now? Chelsea are spending and spending and spending. They're struggling.
That's going to stop though, Gareth. That's going to stop.
Look at the mess they could be left in if that goes wrong. Whereas Spurs, are in a really comfortable position. Yes, we're not winning any trophies, but Chelsea aren't winning anything in the last few years either. So there's a fine balance between being ambitious but being silly. And I think a lot of clubs have been silly, and that's why there's Chris, apart from Spurs must have spent the most in this transfer window out of all the teams, maybe apart from Brighton, but Brighton have money in the bank because they sold players over the last few years. Out of Man City, Arsenal, I know Chelsea have been spending, but Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Spurs. I mean, Spurs have probably spent more than all of them 3 teams this window.
It's quite amazing that Newcastle haven't got the signing of Mark Gay over the line because they're haggling on the price. And if you want a player that badly, you have to pay that money. And the fact that Newcastle, an extremely wealthy club, are haggling now over a couple of £1 million, I think speaks volumes.
Apparently they can't go the extra $5 million because they'll breach the rules, which is that shows you. Football has changed.
And of course, Chelsea, Maresca going in there, working with 40 odd players. I think that I'd have done exactly the same. You've got to, cut half of them off and say, look, I'm only going to be working with 20 odd players. And I think he's going to do a good job there if given the time.
You can only register 28 players.
Well, there you are. There you are.
So legally, there's no point in working with them players because they can't. And I mean, from what I understand, Chelsea have to shift 17 players in the next 5 days, or they're all going to be sitting there on the books and they can't use them, which is madness. And apparently they haven't even got enough coaches. They sort of keep them occupied on the other side of the pitch. And the most shocking statistic I heard was when they were doing pre-season work, they hadn't enough gym machines to get all the players on a machine at the same time, which is crazy.
Madness. Last question we'll take from Chris Bates. We should have sold James Madison in the summer. Is that a bit harsh, Gareth?
Crazy. He's one of our best players. Yes, he can be frustrating at times. Yes, he's injury prone, but I mean, it's no secret. When Madison plays well, Spurs play well. It's a bit like when Ericsson was at Spurs. When he played well, Spurs played well. Madison, for me, on his day, is as good as any player in that position in the league. De Bruyne is probably still a top player, but he's probably at the back end of his career. Odegaard's a fantastic player, or not. Madison's probably your best outside of that, and if he stays fit, consistent, he can be that player for us. So, look, Madison stays fit, and it's a big if because we know he gets knocks. But I think that England, I think it's a bit like the Basuma thing, the laughing gas. Seeing his response on Saturday, I'm hopeful that it's a breaking point for him when he returns. And I think England leaving Madison out, I'm hoping it's a kick in the backside for Madison that he needs to be more consistent. He needs to get over the injury knocks and really knuckle down because he's such a talented player, Chris. I mean, 10 games only last season. You wouldn't have swapped Madison for any player in the league. He was that good. So, no, crazy. I wouldn't be entertaining anything from Madison unless it was upwards of 100 million. That would be it.
Gareth, what have you made of this stream and with some of these comments and questions? Because it's fair to say that we don't all agree, and we don't agree on everything to do with our football club. Some people do have some very, very different opinions to you and I. What have you made of the opinions and comments today?
Chris, personally, I think it's great. That I've really enjoyed watching your viewer podcast with the other lads as well, because I mean we all speak regularly, but it's great hearing the different opinions. And look, no one's right or wrong here. I mean, I've said things in the past that were right, said things in the past that were wrong. I've read off certain players that ended up being good. I backed certain players that weren't very good. So everyone's entitled to their opinion. That's the best thing about podcasts, about football. Why we love doing this, Chris. It's why when you text me, I kind of shelve whatever plans I have. I mean, I'm letting down my girlfriend here at the minute, so I'll have to patch things up here. But look, I love the debate. I love the media. That's why we all watch Monday Night Football and hearing Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher. Everyone's different, and these podcasts gives the viewers their chance. They have their say because yes, you put up the viewer comments, but you sometimes have 3 guests on, and by the time you get round to us, and you might only get a few. These are the shows that people will probably enjoy more, and they get their chance. They have their say, and look. I might have laughed at certain things tonight, and people probably sitting in their home watching this and laughing at me and you. So, look, it's great to have different debate. And personally, I mean, if you were doing this show every week, Chris, I'd be on. So, look, I think it's great. And every viewer that tuned in tonight, fair play. And hopefully watch the podcast more often because it really is the only Spurs podcast that I think is worth watching. And that's not a bit anybody else, but this show, everybody has their say, and no one's wrote off.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, Gareth. And I didn't tell Gareth to say that, by the way, everyone. But no, it is very, very important. And that's why we started doing these questions and comment shows, because, you know, some people said to me, oh, you only get a certain guest on or a certain opinion on the channel. And I've always said that that is not the way that we want to go. We want all opinions. So we read out all the questions, or as many as we possibly can, all the positive stuff, all the negative stuff, and everything in between. And, you know, as Gareth rightly said, you know, we're never going to say to people how to feel, and no one is right or wrong. Everyone has an opinion. So I absolutely love doing these shows. Gareth, you've been a great guest as per usual. Thanks so much. And hopefully you can come on again and do one of these again with me in the near future. Is your YouTube channel still up and running? Are you still actively working on it? And if so, tell everyone how to subscribe and what the channel is called.
Thanks very much, Chris, for having me on as usual. Love coming on, talking Spurs. Unfortunately, back in Ireland here, I know there's a few Irish people saying there it's good to have me on, but there's not as much Spurs sort of friendly as there is probably where you are, Chris. Obviously, being an area where there's a lot of Tottenham fans, probably isn't the same here. A lot of Liverpool, Man United, Celtic. But yes, I do a podcast on the Premier League, so we cover all Premier League teams. More so your favorite teams, including Spurs. But we do a show twice a week. We have different fans on from Ireland and sometimes in England that come on as well. And we talk all things Premier League. So you can find me at the 12th Man Podcast on the 12th Man Podcast on YouTube, and you can follow me at my Twitter on below my name there at Gareth Hotspurs, predominantly about Spurs when it's on X. So look, as always, brilliant to chat about Spurs. Very positive, Chris. I think this season's going to be a good one. I'm not going to go as bold and big as what Lee McQueen does and say the trophies are coming, but I'm more confident they're coming more than ever.
That was actually my line. The trophies are coming, and I haven't said that for a while. Hopefully, I'll be coming out and saying that again soon. You know, when I feel like we're getting there.
I'm going to the West Ham game in October, so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm hoping we're in a good position come the West Ham game. So that'll be my first game this season. So my girlfriend's dragging me away from it. She's saying, Gareth, forget about Spurs. Just focus on our holidays. And I says, no, we have to make time for Spurs. So we're coming in October. So if you're around the stadium, I'm usually up around James. He's brilliant on the podcast. The voice of Spurs, of course. I'm usually up around there. So if you ever want to have a chat, say what you want, and I'll be there.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, Gareth. Thank you so much, and a big thank you to all of the listeners and the viewers this evening on this stream. And any comments from now until the next one, I'll be compiling a number of them, and we'll be discussing them on the next episode. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, come on, you Spurs.